Hello, everyone. This is Renee Rentmeester, and welcome back to another edition of the Cooking Without Looking podcast. I am the creator and executive producer of the Cooking Without Looking TV show, as well as the podcast. And today we have someone who I had heard about and seen on the internet, the interweb. Um, Victor Gouveia. He's got the podcast, Whose Blind Life Is It Anyway? Victor, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And thank you for doing the podcast with me. I truly enjoyed it. And I just thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. So if you don't mind, Victor, tell us a little bit about your blind life.
I lost my sight back in 2002. What happened was I had treated my body pretty badly over the ensuing years of my life because I was more interested in making money than making sure I was healthy. And at one point well, for lack of a better term, my eyes weren't paying attention. Um, I was in a way kind of flabbergasted because I was a nurse, and even I didn't know at that time that diabetes would affect my vision so drastically. Um, but eventually, in on April 6th of 2002, I married my wife, and on April 7th, I started going blind, figuratively and uh, literally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That must have been like, what were you feeling at that point? I mean, you've got this brand new life, brand new wife, and now,
and a brand new baby because my baby was coming a month later.
wow, everything all at once.
Yes, yes,
So
it was.
So how did you work that all out? I mean, like that's you've seen some of those things where they're like stress tests and they give you a certain amount of points for all things that happen in our lives. And
Yes,
that sounds like you hit the jackpot there in a lot of different ways, up and down.
yes, I did. I did. But I had some saving grace. My daughter was 2 months premature, and she was in the hospital for a couple of months after her birth. But when she did come home, there was a point when I was rocking her to sleep in my arms, and I noticed because at that point I still had some light perception, and I noticed that the windows were open, not the windows rather, but the curtains, and I went to close them, and then just at that moment my vision cleared enough that I could see my daughter's face, um, sleeping there in my arms with her eyes closed and a smile on her face.
Wow.
So, it was like God was saying, "Here, I'll give you this little thing to drive you on."
When was the last time you saw her face, Victor?
Um, it was that day. Hey, I apologize. Now I'll go. I apologize for that. Um, the last time I saw her face was in August. Yeah, August of 2002.
Wow.
And that was the picture I lost my sight on. I mean, that was the last thing I saw.
So now she's like 21.
She is, yes.
And is she have, growing up with you being blind, is she more empathetic and compassionate you know, or you're just dad?
Uh, Well, I am dead. I am dead in that way. Having said that, I mean, my blindness has always been a part of her life. It's not something she's ever looked on as inferior or limiting or anything like that.
Sure.
Um, if anything, she's a typical teenager, typical young adult who does everything except what we need her to do. Um,
But of course.
yeah, of course. And essentially she is in her own little world playing her video games, and she just got a job, so she's concentrating on that also. So things tend to go by the wayside when it comes to her. But she is still my little girl, so I can't really complain.
That's yeah, you're right. You're right. The unconditional love of a parent. So you said that before you went blind, you were a nurse. What happened after you went blind?
Well, my life essentially took a nosedive at that point in 2002. And I credit my wife because she pulled me, helped me out of the abyss of depression.
How did you
Um,
do that?
well, essentially being there for me, just being someone who could support me, who could look after me. And we had a lot of things going on at that time. Um, my wife's family had moved in with us from the Philippines, and it was very hard. They weren't treating my wife so well, and I didn't appreciate it. But suffice it to say, there wasn't much I could do, um, because at the end of the day, it was her family.
Sure.
Um, but either way, it was something that could be done. It had to be done, and I did it. Um, Having said that, I also came across a show that was on our radio reading services on television, and that was the Blind Handyman Show and Blind Like Me, hosted by Phil Parr out of Lufkin, Texas. And he became quite a good friend to me, and I was inspired by him and what he could do. And that helped me out of my depression also. He helped me realize that blindness is more of an inconvenience than a limiting disability. And that inspired me to do my show, which is Meet My Blind Life, which is the show I interviewed you on.
What?
And I'm sorry.
Oh no, no. I was just gonna say, how did you choose that name?
Uh, well, actually, a lot of people have something in their lives that they're blind to, um, whether it be limiting or not, but they don't realize it until we bring it out in them. And I like to bring that out in people and let people listen to that and get inspiration from it to feel better about themselves and feel that, hey, if they can do this, so can I.
So I just so you started, and what else do you do? This is your whole life right now, correct?
It is, yes, it is. It is. Um, we also have other shows. There's currently one on hiatus for the summer, Zoe's Blind Kitchen Corner, um, which she does a cooking show of her own. Hers has video though. Um, she hasn't quite transcended to the podcast realm. Um, but I still put it up as a podcast because, like her, she does her show in a way that people can follow along, because she is blind,
Right.
and she describes everything she's doing and stuff like that. I also got permission from the producers of Blind Like Me and The Blind Handyman to reproduce their shows, or rebroadcast their shows rather, on Saturday mornings. Um, we have other shows, for example, Donna Jodden's Dining with Donna, where she talks about her recipes, and Ask Donna, where she talks about her sight loss coach, and stuff she does with that. Um, the other two shows we have are the Afternoon Radio Theater Sunday on Saturday afternoons. It was on Sunday afternoons, but something came up where I had to switch it to Saturday afternoons. And we have the privilege of being the only YouTube channel and podcast that actually does a show for talking about sex, sexuality, and relationships from a blind perspective. And we call it SNAP, the Saturday Night Adult Party. Um, and I host that with a friend of mine. Her name is Monica Jones, also known as Pepsi Mama. And we essentially, like I said, talk about sex, sexuality, and relationships. I mean, you'll find shows like that everywhere on the internet, but you won't find one talking about blindness. It's like people find that blind people don't have sex or have relationships. It's an amazing concept that people don't understand.
You're exactly right there. It's a funny thing because I think that the lives of people who are blind have been sort of shielded from the rest of the world, from the rest of the population in such a way, like I know growing up, if we ever saw a person who was blind or um, whatever issue, physical issue they may have had, we were told not to look, to look away or whatever, don't stare. But then that meant that no one was talking, no one was communicating, and just basic life things like intimate relationships. People don't realize that there is such a thing with people who are blind, and isn't it basically the same thing, Victor?
Yes, it is. It is actually, except if anything, we are more attuned to each other's pleasures and sensations because we tend to touch as opposed to see. A lot of people, well, not to put too fine a line on it, a lot of people concentrate on their own pleasures when they are having sex. Um, and so with us, we have to feel what we're doing. And so that gives us a little more empathy in what the other person is feeling. It's an amazing concept that I didn't, well, I've known about this for some time, but I guess I just never told anyone about it um, quite publicly. But yeah, I mean, blind people tend to feel our way around. And so it's amazing what we can feel through our fingers and sense of touch. And you can feel a partner's pleasure um, as you progress through the sexual concourse, and it's amazing. I mean, it feels great when you're pleasuring someone else and enjoy that.
I know that is amazing, and to think that it sounds like it's almost better than having sight, right?
For me, it is. Yes, yes. For me, it is. I mean, in terms of sexuality, when I went blind, it opened up my, well, so to speak, my vision of sex and sexuality to a way that I never thought of before. I had my way of thinking before, but when I lost my sight, it gave me a whole new way to view things. And I mean, that was a blessing and a curse, of course, uh, but it was mostly a blessing. uh, being able to think like that.
Right, right. Because you're not like popping on the internet and looking for porn sites, right? You're actually into doing whatever you're doing with your partner.
Yes, and of course the other thing too is when you research videos or how to do stuff on the internet, um it's amazingly one-sided. Everybody's concentrating on the visual aspect of it. But nobody concentrates on the actual function of it, the part that blind people need, which is the wording of it. Nobody says, well, you have to do this with a penis or this with a vagina, blah, blah, blah. They simply show you how to do it, but they don't think that blind people have to learn this also.
They probably just don't even think, period, past that.
Exactly.
They're living in a sighted world and they have a little gate around their mind and they're not thinking of people in that way, blind people or people with physical disabilities, they just don't think in that way.
Right. And the one thing you said earlier that we're taught not to look or stare at people who are different or people who are a little bit different from us. But at the end of the day, that also stops us from asking and questioning these people about how they feel and how they do things, how they uh, want to do things, so to speak. uh, that gives us a very limiting and isolating factor in our lives that other people just don't understand that.
No, and you know what? It's interesting. I saw online the other day one of my friends who he's totally blind online, and the question he posed was, well, when I get to a party or something or with a group, the moment someone finds out I'm blind, they get real quiet. And why is that? And I'm thinking, well, I think people who are sighted, I'm sighted, um, we've been taught, as I said, not to look away, but we think we're going to hurt someone by mentioning their blindness. We think that you'll be offended if we ask questions, and sometimes it's like, well, it gets down to like, oh, what do I call you? Do I call you blind? Do I call you visually impaired? Did I call you low vision? What do I call you? And really, all these years, I've been doing this for 22 years. I've never found a single person who was blind who got offended by any question.
You've touched on a very serious pet peeve of mine. The fact that the world is becoming so sensitive
Yes.
that we are losing the ability to speak.
We just stay quiet.
Yeah, exactly. And all of us have to keep our mouths shut to the point where we lose our ability to converse with people, to interact with people, because we're so afraid we might say something wrong. We might say something that may offend. And yet, how are we supposed to learn?
Right.
How are we
Been
supposed to
offended?
know?
Have you ever been offended if someone asks you about your blindness?
Oh, God, no. No, not at all. I've been offended when they haven't asked
Well,
because,
they pretend
for them just to assume that I can't do something or don't want to do something, it really pisses me off, excuse the term.
that.
Um, and just thinking that way that they've been taught not to offend me, I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
Right. It's like this little chicken wire around your brain. And they think that if they stay quiet. I mean, I had one lady from the show. She when we go to the studio or we go to a party, and she was totally blind. She also had diabetic retinopathy. And
Mhm.
when we go, she said, you know what? She goes, she heard like one of her old friends, but that person didn't stop to talk to her. They sort of pretended like they weren't there so they didn't have to sit and talk with her. Or I had another friend, his grandpa was blind, and when they'd go visit him at the Jewish home, he would just sort of like they wouldn't talk to him. He'd just be sitting there by himself because they figured, oh well, he doesn't really know that we're here anyway.
Yeah, and that's an amazing concept to live by. Just having to live so limited in your scope that it it offends me to this day.
Yeah, if we don't talk to one another, like you say, that we'll never learn from one another. We'll never learn how like we're pretty much the same, that we do some things differently, but we're down deep, we're still all humans.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And knowing that a person is unable to ask, but they want to just, I mean, it makes that conversation awkward. It makes that conversation limited to in its scope and what you can do.
Well, when you sense that someone's doing that, what do you do to break through?
I'll say something offensive.
like, like, feel free.
Well, no, I can't really say that on this show,
Okay.
but uh I'm essentially I say something that I think will surprise them in a way.
Like shock
Uh
them.
to shock them, yes, exactly. To show them that, there's nothing they can say that will offend me.
And then you wish you could see their face, right? When you say
That is true. I do wish that. I do wish
it.
that. But the sound of silence is amazing when you know what's there.
Right? Silence is deafening sometimes.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is amazingly deafening.
Oh, Victor, I don't remember what you told me, but I think you're not like the big cook in the house. Your wife is?
Yeah, she's a huge cook. Actually, she cooks amazingly well.
Well,
Um, I I mean, some of the Filipino dishes she makes I can't appreciate as much. Because there are some things she uses, like okra, for example.
uh,
Um, because I mean, it's just so slimy when it gets made. The texture just bothers me
yeah.
in my mouth. And but okra and there's this vegetable called bitter melon, uh, which I simply, for lack of a better term, it's bitter, hence its name. Um, but she has taught me to appreciate squash a little better.
Ah, okay.
Uh, yeah, that's something I never thought of eating before I met her. And over the years, she's brought me over to the dark side of squash.
Well, squash I can handle, especially with a little salt and some butter. But the
Mhm.
okra, no, I haven't even tried that because I had heard horror stories about the sliminess. And I'm like you, I don't like anything with a texture like that. Like if you don't cook your eggs all the way, it's got those little slimy things in. No,
Yes.
no. Can't,
Yeah,
not my favorite thing.
that's right. You'd mentioned that during our interview. And I also thought, I'm glad that my wife is a lot like me when it comes to spicy foods. Because even though my father could handle spicy foods like crazy, my daughter as well. I mean, it's like the spiciness doesn't exist for her. Um, I can't. I mean, the slightest little bit of extra hot, and I am sweating like a pig and barely functioning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's amazingly harsh for me.
Well, you said you had a macaroni salad, which is always a favorite at family functions in the summertime, whenever. Do you want to
Mhm.
share that recipe with us?
Sure, I can. I can. Um, there are some things you need, and I should specify that the caveat here is the preparation time is a long time.
Okay.
Um, it is a long time because there's a lot of chopping involved. Um, Now I'm not sure about how other people feel about chopping, but I'm not so afraid of knives as other people. Um, I Back in the 80s and late 70s, we had a show here called Walk with Yan, which was a Chinese gentleman who would cook with a wok and make Chinese dishes. Um, I believe that was on CBC, I think.
Right, because you're in
And
Canada.
right, I am in Canada. And he taught me that if I'm going to chop vegetables, the best way to do it is to place your fingers on the vegetable and put your knuckles up against the edge, the side of the knife, and that way you don't manage to cut anything. And that's how you space your cutting. And so one thing I do is a lot with that. When I chop my vegetables, I always place the side of the knife against the my first and second knuckle when I'm chopping, and that way my fingers stay out of the way so I don't manage to chop them off. Um, but having said that, there are some things that you can pretty much put any vegetable you want in there, but some go better than others. You will need onions. Now, this depends on how much you make, but you will need onions. You will need bell peppers. You can put whatever color bell pepper you want, green, red, orange. I like to put a whole bunch of different bell peppers. Um, Now, I don't recommend placing any spicy peppers in there. Um, because it kind of I feel it ruins the taste.
Right.
And I'll tell you why in a minute. You also need tomatoes and some parsley. Um, and you chop all of that into very fine, not fine, but very chop. Oh, for the life of me, I can't remember the word. Um, Finely chopped vegetables. So you have piles of these vegetables just sitting to the side,
About
waiting
how
to be
much of each,
combined.
Victor?
Well, it'll depend on how much you want to make. I usually make a lot of them, a lot of it. When I make mine, I make tons of it because a lot of people really find they love it, and they can't stop eating it. So I tend to take at least five of the bell peppers of different colors. I will take, I really can't measure this parsley in any degree, but it is, I guess, a stalk of parsley. Um, you also need feta cheese. That's an important thing because
Okay.
that adds some saltiness to the dish. Um, in terms of onions, I think two onions are enough. Two small onions or one large one. Um, you can put garlic, but you have to mince it really well. You have to mince the garlic very, very finely if you're going to add that. And of course, I mean, it wouldn't be a pasta salad without pasta.
There you
Um,
go.
you know,
What do you like,
um,
the little elbows or what's your favorite?
Elbow. Yeah, I tend to use elbow pasta, but you can use any type of pasta. For example, my wife likes to use bow tie pasta.
Oh, sure.
Um, yeah, and I can't imagine using. Well, I guess you can use cannelloni, which is the thick tubular pasta. But I think it is best with if you want to if you want people to enjoy it and divide it up easily. But elbow pasta, yeah, elbow pasta, the kind you get with mac and cheese, that sort of thing.
Right, right.
So you would boil the pasta. Well, I guess you can do this while you're chopping up the vegetables. You could boil the pasta and leave it al dente, which is just under fully cooked. Um, and then once that's done, you put it to the side, drain the water, and you'll also need some olive oil and vinegar. And the ratio is 1 to 1. 1 cup of vinegar to 1 cup of olive oil. Um, Now, if you're going to make a huge, huge bowl of this stuff, um, and you might want to, because let's face it, it goes so fast, it's amazingly um, quick to disappear out of the fridge.
Right.
Um,
Macaroni salad is addictive.
it is, it can be, especially when you make it with just the right amount of feta cheese and pasta.
Right, right, right.
Um, and I forgot to say, you will be crumbling the feta cheese into the salad. Um, and once the salad is boiled up to the point, you drain the water, place it into a large bowl, along with your other ingredients, crumble the cheese on top of it, and then you can toss it all together. And you will find if you leave it in the fridge overnight that the olive oil and vinegar will soak into the pasta, uh, making it a little bit easier to a little more bit more flavorful, if you will.
Sure, sure.
And it tastes great. I mean, it's amazingly. Everybody takes it, everybody eats it. Um, I mean, when I go to a party with it, and it's gone by the time I come back with clean dishes. Pretty much, yeah.
Well, it sounds amazing. You know what? I love feta cheese. So I am gonna try this pasta because I've got stuck in my ways making macaroni salad like the basic old fashioned way. But this sounds like really, really good. And as I say, that feta cheese, that's just calling my name right now, Victor.
It's amazing. People don't I don't know why, but the only thing people put uh in their salads are cheddar cheese or mozzarella cheese. But I love the taste of blue cheese in my salad. I absolutely adore it.
Sure.
A lot of people
Yeah.
are, how can you eat fungus cheese? And I say, well, I love it. I love it. It's absolutely adorable.
I love
Uh,
mold in my salad.
y- you love mold in your salad?
Yeah, because blue cheese is basically mold.
Yes, it is. Yes, yes.
I'm just
Um,
joking around. I do love blue cheese too, but it is
no,
funny.
no, I understand that, but it's interesting the way you put that. I love mold in my salad. I can't imagine saying that to anyone.
Well, that's one of those things you say when people stop talking when they find out you're blind. I love mold in my salad.
Exactly. So if you're going to shock them, there's something you can say that is relatively clean. Yes.
Right. Really something so absurd.
Yes, it is. It is. And at the end of the day, you end up shocking them, and that's what you need to do. You need to shock people out of their silence.
And what advice do you have for someone who may have someone going blind in their family, or if they themselves are going blind? What do you have advice to say to them?
Take stock. Before you lose your sight, be prepared for the eventuality that you will lose all your sight, and take stock of what you have in your life that is worth living for. I mean, there may not be a lot of things, but there's got to be something that has kept you alive all these years. And that same feeling will keep you going for another lifetime. As long as you realize that blindness is an inconvenience rather than a limiting disability. And blindness won't stop you from doing things. It'll just change the way you do things. And that's what you need to do, is learn to do things in a different way.
Well, Victor, if someone wants to reach out to you, how do they contact you?
Well, they can do so on our Facebook page or on Twitter at Blind Who's. That's BLINDWHOSE. Or you can look for me on our Facebook page, which is Whose Blind Life Is It Anyway? As well on YouTube at The Blind Life. Yeah, at The Blind Life. I think that's what I named it. But if you do a search for Whose Blind Life Is It Anyway, you'll find us there as well.
Well, that's tremendous, Victor. Victor, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed it, as well as when you were interviewing me. Again, this is Renee Rentmeester, creator, executive producer of the Cooking Without Looking TV show and podcast. And like we say, thank you for helping us change the way we see blindness, Victor. Have a great day.
You too.